right. Good morning, all the 0 of you that are watching this live. Eventually there will be people watching live, but there are not right now. Good morning, it is Tuesday, which is Tuesday.
Hello.
Really excited to be yapping while she's in the background. Just keeps me honest. Oh, I gotta turn this thing on. Yeah, so just yesterday was kind of a rough day. I know if you saw the video from yesterday, it started out as a very, very emotional low point. And I spent a lot of time yesterday really trying to not only find my way through the day, but also figure out, okay, what is it that causes days like that, and how can I avoid them in the future, right? It's funny, I've been doing freelancing for 3 years now, and just yesterday, for the first time, my mind finally went to, how can I make sure this doesn't happen again? And it occurred to me there are a lot of things that I've been reading and thinking about that have felt like applied in one area of life, but actually apply here. Like, I talked in the podcast a lot about this book called Anti-Fragile, and I talked about it yesterday. This book called Anti-Fragile, and it's funny how I approach it and I really, really dive into it from a philosophical perspective, but I have a hard time seeing the applications right in front of me, which is, how can I make my business so that it is stronger when I run into moments of crisis? How can I make myself stronger so that when days like yesterday happen, I automatically default to where I had to go. I had to physically push myself. And actually, I got lucky yesterday because I had Sue was working from home, so that was obvious. But also, I had a call scheduled with a guy that I haven't spoken to, a good friend of mine from high school, one of my best friends from high school that, you just lose touch, and I hadn't spoken to him in 10 years probably. We got on the phone, and he was like, man, I don't think we've spoken in a decade. And I was like, are you serious? It's been that long? And yeah, we hadn't had any contact in a really long time. And part of that, I think, is because he had some shady government job. I mean that tongue-in-cheek, obviously. He worked for the NSA, which is a shady government job. Anyway, for like 7 years, lived in Maryland, and then, I realized the connection yesterday because Sue is from Maryland. But then he was living in Hawaii, and he's just sort of been back and forth. And but we got to talking, and it turned out to be the type of conversation that just brings you back sort of to your roots and brings you back to the things that make you tick. And I don't know, I just felt really good. And then I think that in combination with taking some of the footage from yesterday, because that was as vulnerable, I think, as I'm capable of being on camera yesterday, because I was legitimately on the verge of tears. Sue can attest to that. I was, even before the recording started, I was like, not breathing. Yeah, it was not a good situation. But you have days like that when you're an entrepreneur. Even when it's not just you, when you have a business, you have employees, you have days like that where you wake up and you think, where's the money going to come from? How are we going to do this? Like, what's going to, and things that sometimes are beyond your control, or at least in the moment are beyond your control. Like yesterday I woke up and there were things that I could have made different decisions earlier that probably wouldn't have kept me from being in that situation yesterday, but I had already made those decisions. And so when I woke up yesterday, and actually the stress, I think, started to build the night before when I realized the financial problem, there's nothing I could do on that day. I couldn't control it. I couldn't control the outcome. And so first of all, the big lesson is I am realizing that I have to control the future by making decisions now. So I can't, like, one of the things I went back and did, and I talked about this in the video yesterday, is I went back and I realized that even after all of that stress, I had taken sort of a backseat and a victim approach to the solution to the problem. Like, I had just gone back, to give you the specifics, I'm not talking in generalities and in being too cryptic. I had a transfer that was supposed to come from Stripe, which is the payment processing system, but because of an issue with making a deposit into an account, they put a froze on the bank. They put a froze on the they froze the bank account, so that the money was supposed to go to. Well, Stripe can't deposit into a bank account that's frozen. And so they tried the first deposit. It was in 2 deposits. They tried the first one. It was frozen, so it got returned. Stripe sent me a notification and said, hey, this didn't go through. You can retry it, or you can put in different bank information. I was like, oh, just retry it. Well, then Sunday night hit, and it had tried again, but it got the error message from the second deposit, and so it wasn't going to deposit into there at all. And so I was like, oh shoot, like it's not going to get there till Wednesday. But what I did is, instead of in that moment doing what would have been the smart thing and going through and configuring the other bank and just saying, I'm just going to put this, I need this money, I just tried to restart it again. And so there was a chance that Wednesday was going to roll around and I was going to get that same error message. And then it would be Friday, and then it would be Monday, and then it would be Thursday, and then I would never get that money. And so I was like, no, the way that I'm going to make sure that this does not happen again on Wednesday is I'm going to switch the banks out. So it's all set, it's ready to go, it should be deposited. Hopefully there are no holds on the other bank account, which I should probably look into. In fact, that's what I'm going to do. That's a good point. I'll do that today. Reach out to the bank and just make sure. And they have pretty good customer service, so it's fine. But that comes back to actually a conversation that I was having with a good friend of mine on Saturday. Was it Saturday or Sunday? We went with Steve. Was that Sunday? It was Sunday.
I'm glad I could help you.
Yes. It's your emotional support, if nothing else.
Make sure we saw them both days.
Did we see him Saturday? I don't think we did. Anyway, we went on a little nature walk. Yeah, you saw Nicole, yeah. Went on a little nature walk, and I got talking with a friend of mine who started listening to the podcast, and he brought up a very specific thing that he was very interested in, which was present bias. And I talk about it in the podcast, which again, the plug for the podcast is brettmarno.com/podcast. Check it out. I talk a lot in there about how I fall victim so often to making decisions in the present without really taking into account or without really regarding future Brett. And I actually consider, this is going to sound weird, but I actually consider myself to be a different person than future Brett, which is part of the problem. So I make decisions based on my own interests for right now, and then future Brett, which is also me, but the consequences from what I made, the decisions I made in the past, just has to figure it out. And he made a very important, very interesting point that I had never thought about, which is, I think subconsciously, I just assume that future Brett has figured out solutions to the problems that are the consequences to the bad decisions that present Brett is making, right? So I am making decisions, and my subconscious assumption is that future Brett has figured out a way to solve for the problems that I'm creating with the decisions that I'm making right now, which every time future Brett becomes present Brett, it's not the case. So I just keep pushing off, resolving some of those issues and figuring out some of those questions, and there's no real resolution. And so I end up in situations like I did yesterday, where it all sort of comes to a head. And I think that a lot of times, especially entrepreneurs and people that don't interface with other people, and where the rigidity and the structure of their personal schedule is not set by them, it's set by someone else, some other organization or structure or whatever, it can be very easy to slide into that false sense of security because nothing's going wrong today, which means nothing's going to go wrong. When really, a certain percentage, I think, of present Brett's time and energy should be going towards hedging against what's most likely going to go wrong in the future. Because if nothing else, I mean, the numbers don't lie. I have not made good financial decisions. And we know that because I'm not flush for cash. And it's not because I don't make enough. And it's not because I don't have opportunity. It's just because of present Brett decisions that end up shooting future Brett in the foot. So that's, I think, that for me, that's the takeaway from yesterday, is not so much. I mean, obviously, a lot of it is that there are bad days when you're an entrepreneur, and that's a strong point. And I think everyone that is an entrepreneur needs to understand that some days you're going to wake up, even if you do everything right, some days you're going to wake up and it's just the stress is just going to hit you, and it's incredibly overwhelming. But there's a lot more that you can do to mitigate that than I think either you realize or that you think about. Because there's a lot of like sexiness around being an entrepreneur and around being your own boss and around setting your own hours and all this stuff, and kind of being able to do anything you want with your money and all these kinds of things. But it's not always quite that cut and dry. It's not really always that simple. And so you got to make sure, I got to make sure that I'm not letting current success dictate my future planning. You know what I mean? Like, I think I've always been a little bit too optimistic about the future, naively optimistic about the future. And it's more, one of the shifts that I'm starting to make is being a little bit more optimistic about the present and then realistic about the future, based on past experience. So anyway, we are getting to the end of the time when I do this. I don't really know how to end these. But we will see you tomorrow. Tomorrow is Wednesday, which will be, we got some fun stuff that's coming tomorrow. I'm making some money today, selling some stuff. Downsizing, creating a smaller, shall we say, electronic footprint. Man, I messed that up. That would have sounded so cool if I had said it right. Anyway, peace out.